Picture yourself in a bustling medieval market, the kind where the air hums with the chatter of merchants and the clink of coins, where the scent of fresh bread mingles with the sharp tang of herbs and the faint smoke of a distant fire. It's the 14th century, and you're weaving through stalls piled high with glistening cuts of meat, vibrant fruits, and tiny, precious sacks of spices that gleam like jewels under the watchful eye of their son. This is no chaotic bazaar of careless gluttons. It's a world of precision, where every transaction is scrutinized, every piece of meat inspected, and every pinch of saffron treated like gold. Because, frankly, it's worth more than that. Now, imagine someone telling you that these people, so meticulous in their craft, would squander those costly spices to mask the taste of rotten meat. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Yet, this is the tale we've been fed for centuries, repeated in classrooms, books, and Hollywood films. A myth so wild it's almost laughable. Today, we're going to unravel this lie, step by step, and uncover the truth about medieval food culture. Grab a seat by the fire, because this is a story that'll change how you see the past. You're still in that market, watching a butcher carve a fresh kill with a steady hand, knowing that one wrong move could cost him his livelihood. Food inspectors prowl the stalls, their sharp eyes catching any hint of spoilage. These aren't people who'd toss a fortune's worth of pepper onto rancid meat. It's like imagining you'd use a diamond to patch a hole in your shoe. The idea comes from Victorian scholars, those 19th century know-it-alls who looked at medieval cookbooks bursting with exotic spices and leapt to the wildest conclusion. Surely, they thought, these backward folks were just trying to cover up decay. They couldn't fathom that people centuries ago might have loved complex flavors as much as we do. With their starched collars and even stiffer biases, they painted the Middle Ages as a time of ignorance, a place where people were barely a step above cavemen. By the 20th century, this myth was cemented. Textbooks spread it, movies dramatized it, and suddenly every medieval feast on screen showed lords gnawing on suspiciously grimy meat, doused in spices. But the truth? It's far more fascinating. Let's step into the medieval kitchen and see what really happened. You're now standing by a crackling hearth in a noble's kitchen, where a cook measures out pinches of cinnamon and cloves with the precision of a jeweler. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meat and simmering herbs, and every move is deliberate, every ingredient chosen with care. This isn't a desperate attempt to salvage spoiled food. It's a performance, a display of skill and wealth. Medieval people weren't just eating to survive. They were masters of preservation, turning necessity into art. Take salting. This wasn't just sprinkling table salt on a steak. They used specific salts for different meats, in a process so precise that cod preserved this way could last years, fueling trade across Europe. Smoking was another craft. Artisans chose oak for beef, applewood for pork, beechwood for fish, each wood imparting unique flavors. And then there's confit, where meat was slow-cooked in its own fat and sealed airtight, keeping it fresh for months while making it taste divine. Fruits were preserved in honey or sugar. Monasteries churned out early jams, and in northern regions, ice houses, carefully engineered with drainage and insulation, kept food cool through summer. These weren't crude methods. They were the work of generations who knew their trade inside out. Now, let's see how they ensured that meat never reached the point of needing rescue. You've moved to the edge of the market, where a butcher's stall is under scrutiny. An inspector prods a cut of meat, sniffing for freshness, while the butcher watches nervously, knowing a single misstep could mean fines or public humiliation. Medieval towns took food safety seriously. Some had stricter laws than we do today. Butchers belonged to powerful guilds with rules about everything, where animals could be slaughtered, how meat was stored, how long it could be displayed. Sell something spoiled, and you might end up in the stocks. The offending meat hung around your neck like a badge of shame. Customers weren't pushovers either. They inspected their purchases, demanded quality, and complained if anything was off. And here's the thing. Most people ate fresher meat than we do. Living in small communities, they got their meat from local farms or their own livestock, slaughtered and inspected on the spot. Leftovers? They were turned into sausages, pates, or dried goods, culinary traditions that gave us salami and chorizo. This was a world where food was respected, where every part of an animal was used, and where spoilage was the enemy, not the norm. But what about those spices? Why were they so special? You're now at a spice merchant's stall, where tiny sacks of pepper, saffron, and cinnamon are guarded like treasures. These weren't just seasonings. They were wealth, power, a ticket to the world beyond. A pound of saffron could buy a horse. A sack of pepper could pay your rent for a year. Spices were so valuable they were used as currency, included in wills alongside land and jewels. They fueled empires. Venus grew rich controlling spice routes, and Columbus sailed west chasing a new path to Asia's spice markets. Only the elite could afford them, using them to create dishes that dazzled with complex flavors, like blancmange or sauce cameline, the medieval equivalent of fine dining. Ordinary folks stuck to local herbs, garlic, onions, parsley, grown in their gardens. The idea of wasting spices on spoiled meat is absurd when you consider the economics. If you could afford spices, you could afford fresh meat. If you couldn't afford fresh meat, spices were out of the question. This myth doesn't just get the facts wrong. It hides a vibrant world of culinary skill, global trade, and cultural pride. So, what does it all mean? You're back by the tavern fire now, the story coming full circle. We've debunked the myth that medieval people used spices to mask rotten meat, and what we've found is a world of ingenuity. They had preservation techniques we still use, from salting to smoking to refrigeration. They ate fresher meat than many of us, thanks to local farming and strict regulations. Spices were a luxury, not a cover-up, used to showcase wealth and creativity. This myth persists because it's a convenient story, one that lets us feel superior to a past we've been taught to see as primitive. But the Middle Ages weren't a time of darkness. They were a time of craft, community, and innovation. Our ancestors built systems to keep their food safe, delicious, and sustainable, from the butcher's guild to the spice merchant's caravan. They weren't just surviving. They were creating a legacy that's still on our plates today. So, next time you hear this myth, ask yourself, would you waste a fortune on something precious to hide a flaw you could avoid? Neither would they. If you've loved uncovering this truth, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with the weirdest historical myth you've heard. Maybe we'll debunk it next.